You are listening to the What a Word podcast, an interview style podcast where guests bring their unique experiences and insight on culture, life's challenges, and faith. Each episode is seasoned with words which will inspire and encourage. Now, here is your host, Ryan Sharp.
Welcome to the What a Word podcast. I want to thank those of you who've been listening, who've subscribed, who watch us on YouTube, who listen on your favorite podcast app, actually. The response has been tremendous. And I don't take it for granted that there are many other things you could be doing, but you tune in each week, and I'll never take that for granted. I'm excited about today's conversation. My guest is a good friend of mine. We go way back. Her name is MyShawn, Hall-Artis. She comes from a musical family, is now pursuing her doctorate, has a bachelor's in behavioral health, a master's of science in counseling, a master's of philosophy in criminal justice, and we'll talk about her work. Currently serves as a health and human services coordinator and is doing a number of different things in the community. We'll talk about the quad effect. I'm honored to have her here. Please join me in welcoming singer and psalmist, MyShawn Hall-Artis, to the What a Word podcast. Welcome, MyShawn. How are you today?
Thank you. I'm good. How are you, Ryan? It's so good to be here. I'm actually so humbled. I'm so humble. So thank you so much. It's an honor. It truly is an honor. So thank you for thinking of me in this fashion.
Most welcome, most welcome. Now, your bio talks about your musical family. Did you know at an early age that you were a part of a special family, or did you think this was ordinary and everybody had a family like your family?
I think so. Initially, when I was young, just growing up hearing music, my grandfather played the piano and he taught his children how to play the piano. My grandmother was a singer, and of course, she taught her children how to sing. And so for me, but just hearing it every day, especially on Fridays for worship and on Saturday in church, it just felt like this was just how things are done. But it wasn't until I want to say I was about maybe 5 or 6 when I sang in church, and everyone was just, saying they were so proud of me. And then one thing I remember saying that they used to, Brother and Sister Hall wouldn't have it any other way. All of the Hall girls sang, and all of the boys would play or they would sing. And so that's when I realized that I came from a family where music, knowing and loving and having a great appreciation for music was not only not an option, but it was truly a gift that God had particularly ordained my family with. So
It's powerful. Now for me, late 80s, early 90s, I read album credits. Many of us who grew up in the city, Mount Vernon, Bronx, New York, we were aware of just how far-reaching your family's musical legacy was and is. In fact, I went to school with a gentleman by the name of Al Brown, who later became known as Al B. Sure. He
yes.
was a few years ahead of me. And I looked through the album credits, his album credits, intro, a trio. I looked through theirs, Mary J. Blige,
Yes.
every impactful singer at that time and groups. We can go down the list, Heavy D,
Yes.
a variety. And in those credits, there was a notable name that kept coming up, Dave Jam Hall. And then I met you probably around the same time. And so I knew beyond the gifting in church that the family's legacy was really far-reaching. Did
Yes.
there come a time when you saw music, R&B even, as an option for you?
There was, I think, there was an option where, of course, like every teenager, you just imagine yourself being famous and singing, but I think for me, and I'll be honest, one of the things that I did not like, I think that kind of deterred me away from becoming not necessarily R&B or just particularly gospel. It was just the whole repeat process in the studio.
Mhm.
And for me, I was a one and done. Like, I just want to, let me just sing, let me just do what I got to do, and let's get out of here. But I think watching my uncle do his thing, because there are many of those that he has worked with that I've had the pleasure to meet, watching them work, I think for me was good enough.
Mhm.
And then there were times when I would, just kind of sample stuff for him. He would call me down, and when he first started out at my grandparents' basement of their home, and then when he got his own home, I would sample stuff for him. That was fun. But to actually to have to go in and just, okay, do it again. And then, okay, now you got to double it. And then now you got to do this over. And I was just like, yeah, I can't do this. This is not. So for me, it was short-lived. And I think that's where my reality came in, where I was just like, nah, I'd rather just sing and then be done. So that's what it was for me.
Awesome. And here's the irony. MyShawn is a psalmist and a singer, and she knows how to do perfection. I'll put it mildly. She knows how to do, the egos and the craziness that comes with leading worship
Yes.
teams, and the very same meticulous, the order, the repetition is now a part of
Yes.
her fabric. So it's amazing how it comes full circle.
Yes, it is. Yes. And I can honestly say my family has played a very big part of that. Watching my aunts direct choirs, watching my uncle direct the youth choir, and just seeing that they knew what they wanted to hear. And so just watching them and then being put in the position, it was like a light bulb went off. I was like, oh, that's why they would go so hard. Or that's why, because you just have this, you hear it. And it's not only just organic, but it's spiritual in a sense, it just moves you. And so when you see it and you want it to come to life, I think that's what it's really all about. And so, yeah, I get it from my family, but not only just my family, because there's a lot of people in church who I grew up with, seeing them the same way. Like Kevin Anderson, Marie Hodge, the list can go on and on. Like, I just watching them, knowing that they heard something and they just needed it to come to life, to me was amazing. And so just being put in that position, it definitely opened up my eye to, having a key sound in music. So
do you like where we are now musically as a church? Because your bio speaks of the journey, the evolution with choirs, groups, soloists, etc. To now where praise and worship teams and praise and worship ministries. Do you like the place we are now this season, where it's praise and worship?
I like where we are. I just feel like it could be bigger. And when I say bigger, I don't mean bigger in the sense of people getting to know. It's more like, I like the fact that it is inclusive. Praise and worship is inclusive, whereas when you're singing with the choir, it's just those who are on the choir. But praise and worship is inclusive. Everyone's praise, whether you can sing or not, is acknowledged in the moment of praise and worship, right? But I just feel like it could be bigger. One thing that I find particularly in the Adventist faith, is that we hold on to what was, rather than honing and molding and making bigger what is. Because today it could be, when I was growing up, it was choirs, who was the biggest choir, and we would travel to sing. Now it's praise and worship. But what is it going to be 10 years from now, 10, 15 years from now? So when it's 10, 15 years from now, are we going to hold on to what praise and worship was, or are we going to move to what is being called for us to do? And so that for me is what it's really all about. So I love where we are. I think we could be bigger. And I think we can be far more reaching, because there's so many souls that are left to be reached. And I think praise and worship is where that can happen at a larger scale, because it's very inclusive.
So, singer, clearly gifted
Thank you.
in that area. There's a career choices you probably had as a young woman growing up in the city, maybe a variety of options, but you chose behavioral health. There seems to be a leaning towards counseling very seriously. What led to that, and were there other options on the table when you were coming up in terms of career choices?
I wouldn't. So this is the thing. Behavioral health, I didn't choose it. It chose me. Um, Growing up, I wanted to be, honestly, I would always say that I wanted to be um, a either a doctor of medicine or a doctor of psychology, but in the sense where it was more so teaching. And I had this picture in my head that I would become a world-renowned doctor of medicine or a world-renowned doctor of psychology, and just teach. And I would teach at Georgetown, right? But I think as I got older, in my teen years, as I moved more into my teen years, I fell in love with hair and makeup. So that was my thing. And I was going to do hair, I was going to do makeup, and I was going to travel the world as a stylist, and do styling for some of Hollywood's or the world's greatest. And then, Mavis Hall, being who she is, the true matriarch, she was just like, no, hair is not a thing. In this family, we become a doctor, a lawyer, a teacher, or a nurse. Those are the things that you become. And in my mind, I was just like, I don't want to do any of those things. And even my aunt, my mom's twin sister, Juliet, she tried to convince my grandmother. She's like, there's money in doing hair. But my grandmother was just like, no, doctor, lawyer, teacher, or nurse. That's your only option.
That's what the halls do.
Yeah, that's what we do. We make it do what it do. So I went on and I went to college. I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. And so I chose behavioral health. And out of that, I started teaching as a teacher's aide. And then I went from being a teacher's aide to a head teacher. And so that's where I fell in love with the art of teaching. And that's when I knew, and I just started to recollect when I would always tell myself that I would be a doctor of medicine or a doctor of psychology, and I would teach. And from there, I went and did my master's, and I wanted to stay in the school, but I no longer wanted to be a teacher because, at least not to grade school children, because it took a toll on my vocal cords. And so I still wanted to use my gift that God gave me of singing, and realizing and recognizing that was taking a toll. I had to take a step back, but I also wanted to still work with children. So I went into counseling, and it's so ironic. The school counseling profession is so competitive, and you don't even recognize it until you're actually in it. And so I just remember, just feeling like, okay, here I am at this crossroad. What do I do? And then my friend, she was able to help me get a job at where she was working, which was a local agency working with children who, at the time, they would call them SED, which stood for social and emotionally disturbed. Now the term is social and emotionally disabled. And that's when I just fell in love with working with that population, and just recognizing the stigma that followed them, and just wanting people to know that just because someone struggles in life, and it may seem apart from what we consider day-to-day normal, right? It's not okay to do. It's not okay to ostracize them. It's not okay to place this stigma and this label. And from there, I started to work with juveniles. And Ryan, I can tell you that the love that I have for them is beyond this world. They are just a group of young people who need love, direction, care, guidance. And so I decided that I would move in the direction, still working with that population, but serving them in a way that they felt they were being served. And so giving them the opportunity to make choices in the things that they wanted to do, what they've always hoped and dreamed about, putting myself in their shoes when I was their age, because I didn't feel like I had much of a say so in choosing what I wanted to do. But, just hearing them and seeing them. And then that's what just led me in that field. And now working with, adults, I've always shied away from adults because, we are set in our ways as adults, right? And so it's that whole concept and idea of like, I was like, I just don't want to keep it in rails again. I'm not doing that. Like, I'm not trying to convince anyone who is above the age of 25 that, listen, you need treatment, and you don't have to take medicine, or you don't have to, but it would be conducive, it would be helpful, beneficial. But now having the opportunity to work with adults in that population, they too, it's just the same thing. They just need someone to show them that they're not ostracized, they're not labeled, they have a voice, and so that's really what led me there.
I imagine your studies made some connections for you. Were you overwhelmed at first when you saw the connections to the classroom, to families, to society, and your role in this great work? Was it overwhelming for you to connect all those dots?
Yeah, it absolutely was overwhelming. I think for me as a teacher, teaching young children, grade school age, seeing them, because at first when you're on the education side, when you're in the classroom, a lot of times as teachers or as education staff, unless you're have some kind of understanding or insight to the behavior that's being displayed or to the struggles that's being displayed in the classroom, you essentially don't know. You just assume that it is just a behavior pattern that is because the child is stubborn or oppositional. No, there's actually biological, organic, environmental things that are impacting these individuals, like I remember one of my first students, I fell in love with him, and he would just, he would do things like upside down in his chair, and I would be writing on the board. So of course my back would be turned, and out of nowhere, he would say, "Look at me, Miss MyShawn." And I would turn around and he's upside down in his chair. And I'm like, no. But, moving on into the behavioral side of things, I recognized that it was just a lot of things that was going on in his life at the time that impacted his outward expression of what was going on. He may not have been, volatile or aggressive in behavior, but just not being able to just simply function and focus in class what was going on impacted his ability to do that. And so what we don't recognize as everyday individuals, that there's so many things, so many factors that come into play into these individual lives. Sometimes they've experienced traumatic experience from being sexually assaulted to just being bullied to, just not having the presence of a parent or to even having the presence of parents, and it's just an environment that's just not conducive to their emotional wellness. That causes these breakdowns. And so you definitely do see that the connection from the classroom to the home to everyday life. And, sometimes people don't know what they're going on with, and so they shy away from them, pushing them away. And it's amazing. It's amazing.
It's interesting, the illustration you gave with the young man, because he's literally upside down, which is a perfect metaphor for probably how his life,
yes,
that's his life.
Yep.
My world is turned upside down.
Yep.
And I want you to get more into what you've amplified with the quad effect. What are you seeing in terms of your work and our caregivers, those who are, responding to these needs? Are we scratching the surface?
I think we are. I think we have scratched the surface, right? And I think, honestly, if you ask me, I think what has helped to scratch the surface was COVID-19.
Wow.
I really believe that, because I think it wasn't until everyone literally had to sit down and just stop. It was when we saw that there are children who are going home to abusive parents. There are wives and husbands who are going home to abusive spouses. There are people who were getting meals every day at school. Children are getting meals every day at school who were not going to have that. People have lost their jobs. And so not only are they now impacted emotionally by their environment, it's now compounded with financial inflexibility, right? And so I definitely think that COVID has served its purpose in that way, is that we have come to recognize that there's so much going on in this world. There's so many people who work every day, who leave their house every day to get away from. And then there are people who are already struggling with a bona fide diagnosable mental illness, who literally leave their home every day to get outside of their thoughts. And they are now confined to the environment that keeps them imprisoned from what they experience day to day. And I think COVID-19 has definitely scratched the surface. I think we are moving in a direction. There have been more funds funneled into the mental health world, but I feel like there's so much more that we are everyday individuals need to be doing. We need to get involved in the schools, and we need to get involved with the mental health agencies. We need to do more community-based work. I mean, it is so imperative, it is so important, and I think that some of us got it, but some of us are afraid of it. And I think those of us who got it need to encourage those who are afraid of it and support those who are afraid of it and reel them in, because it is so important. We've had so many people lose their lives during COVID, taking their own lives during COVID. I had a client call me crying because she couldn't do it. She wanted to jump from her second story patio because she literally was stuck. She's like, I can't be stuck. And I'm stuck in my house. I leave every day. She created a routine for herself to help her manage her emotional wellness, exercising, going for a walk, helping neighbors, and she couldn't do that. And so she felt like she lost herself and did not know who she was. I mean, in that, she said, because I don't know who I am, I just feel like I no longer have a place in this world. And so we have to think about that. How many people who we say look like regular everyday functioning adults or everyday functioning children or young adults lost who they were, and so I definitely see that the surface for mental illness has been scratched. I just feel like we're afraid to literally peel off the Band-Aid. Let's open the wound and heal it. And for me, the quad effect is, for me, because I see it in children, right? Because I feel like the children of today, the young people of today are the adults of tomorrow. The scholars who are coming up in this world are the scholars who will become professionals of tomorrow. And if we don't get them at that single point of access, when they are in that age group, we have lost the professionals and the adults of tomorrow. Sure. So the quad effect is literally a program that I've literally developed just by seeing what I've worked with. And so we have the Children and Youth Introspective Empowerment Commission, where we are far reaching from ages early childhood up to age 17 and a half. And we want to make sure that these children get access to everything that their community offers. And I know sometimes services are limited, access is limited, but when one door closes, another one opens. And so we can definitely approach it, even if it's just a little bit, every little step works, everything goes, every little bit of step takes us a farther more away from developing or creating a child who would fall by the wayside, right? And then we have what I like to call the Teen Life Task Force, and it's a group of particularly targeting young men to take on becoming big brothers to little brothers, and understand who they are within themselves, and addressing the little young men of the future, and teaching them how they can live and survive and be successful in this life. And then I have what's called the Education Coalition for Change, and that's literally actually putting case management in the schools. So instead of having a child, because the school, a lot of people don't know, the schools literally have committees that children who need special services come together to define what access of services the child needs to survive in school, to accommodations in school. what this Education Coalition for Change does, it actually provides what would be considered community-based, what they would get outside of school, in the school, so they can function in school. And along with that, we include the parents. The parents have a say-so, the child has a bigger voice. You know, they get to define what their case management services look like. They have easier access to their case managers. And then we have what I recently created, was called Fab Girls, which stands for, it's an acronym that stands for All Black and Brown Girls. And it's something that I created, just having a Black daughter, you know, and I just want her to know that she's beautiful inside and out. She is a flower, and I have to be the one to plant it and allow her to grow and blossom into a beautiful young lady, a beautiful woman. And so that she can then carry on that legacy and inspire not only her daughter or other young girls in the world. And so it literally targets Black and brown young ladies from all walks of a minority life. From Black girls to the Latinx community, to the Asian community, you know, those young girls from the Middle Eastern community, and teaching them that they are beautiful and they are just a flower waiting to bloom and to shed their light on the world. And so that's really what the quad effect is taking and recognizing that our young people, who are our professional and our adults in the future, they are the one that we are supposed to be laying the groundwork for. And if we're not laying the groundwork for them, then we are going to have some dysfunctional adults in 15 to 20 years. So.
And the thought I had was, with your schedule, I mentioned earlier, now working on doctorate. Are you looking, when time allows, to have chapters in other states if people are interested in being a part of any of those organizations or ministries?
I hope so. I mean, that's that's ultimately the long-term goal, is I want to be able to have chapters everywhere, because this is something that is not just happening where I live. This is something that's happening, across the world, worldwide. I watched something just the other day on the news. The Taliban, the young ladies were set to go back to school. And the Taliban was just like, they got to school believing they were so excited, just seeing the excitement, and then being told no, and the level of distraught and disappointment, the tears. And so it for us, it looks like one thing. And then in that country, it looks like another. And in another country, it looks like another. And in another state, it looks like another, Yes, there are universal things that we are experiencing, which is, racial trauma, racial divide, right? But there are also individual and cultural experiences that are happening, and so anywhere that the quad effect can take place, I pray, and that's hopefully where God is taking this thing, is literally, chapters all over the world, so.
Yeah, it's sobering, because my work as a public defender, working with adults in the criminal justice system. And one of the challenges, anyone who works in my field, I mean, we'll express it openly, is that we meet individuals perhaps too late. Because by the time you're an adult, if you hadn't had the services, the resources coming up, it's very difficult to navigate a complicated world, So, I commend you for that, for what you're doing, man. And
thank you.
And
thank you for your work, because your work is amazing. It's just as amazing. If we look at it, individuals like yourself, public defenders, you're needed. You're needed in a population who is severely underserved. People get labels, they get these convictions, and they're looking forward, upon release, they're looking forward to, being successful and not returning to a life of crime. But like you said, resources are so limited, and the label, the stigma that follows them, they're not able to get access to the things that, they should have access to. A lot of people don't know that sometimes, government insurance, criminals don't have access to health insurance when they are locked up. They don't know that. A lot of people don't know that they don't have access to certain jobs because they have
Criminal convictions, yeah.
Yeah. So, the quad effect, I'm hoping that it touches so many lives in so many ways, because when you say that, it reminds me of a young man who I would meet when I was working at the detention center. And one of the things I'll never forget, you could see he had reached a place of where he was ready to no longer return to crime. But he had crime he had committed that he was there that last time. They were looking to try him as an adult.
Wow.
And I remember talking, just trying to speak life into him. He literally would say, he said, "Miss, this is it for me."
Yeah.
And he said, even if I get out, he literally said, "This is the path that has been paved for me." And I will never forget when I asked him, "What do you mean?" And he said, "My father was in jail. My grandfather is a criminal. I have uncles and relatives who were criminals. This is the path." And he literally said it to me like, "You don't get it. I have no choice but to go down this path." And just to see him so, what is the word, trained with the mind that he had to take this avenue because that's what was set up for him, and so, yeah, I'm hoping that the quad effect is so far reaching, because we have to save our young people of today, because they are our people of tomorrow.
Yeah. And listeners and viewers should know that MyShawn is not only a singer, she speaks, preaches as well. When did you find your preaching voice?
Oh, I lost my sister in 2016 to suicide.
Sorry to hear. Wow.
Thank you. Yeah, and it was the most debilitating. I've never felt so incapacitated and debilitated in all my life. The inability to function, just knowing that she took her own life. Because my sister was a spark. She could light up any room. If she didn't know you, but she walked into that room, my sister, just stepping into the room, her presence demanded the attention. And to know that she had reached so far in her emotional struggles that she thought the only way out was to take her life. That is where I realized I had to find my voice. And it was my daughter, actually, because I remember laying in the bed, Ryan, for just not wanting to function, feeling alone, feeling isolated, feeling like I had lost everything. It was my daughter who came into the room one morning and she tapped me and she said, "Mommy," she said, "there's no food here and we're hungry." And I'm being transparent. I'm telling my story. And I literally laid in the bed and I was just like, okay, I can't do this. Like, I have to function for them, even if I have to function for them. So I just started to find a path, a direction. And then I remember, honestly, it had been about a week or two in just trying to function. And I was just like, no, I can't do this. And what a lot of people don't know is that in that moment, I myself contemplated suicide. And I was just like, I can't function. I can't go on. A part of who I am is gone. Like, because I live for my siblings. I was the oldest. I'm the oldest of all my siblings. And so I had I just felt this innate responsibility to care for them, right? And I was late in the night and I could hear the enemy just speaking, "You should just take your life right now. Just go ahead. You can't live. She's gone. There's nothing else to live for. Your children don't need you." And people don't understand, like, the spiritual warfare is real, right? And literally, I got on the phone. I called my friend Misha. Thank God for her. And she was just like, "I rebuke that spirit in the name of Jesus." And she just started to pray for me. And she said, "Get on your knees right now." And we just started praying and realizing that I had a greater calling on my life than living in that moment. I felt like that was the moment that God needed me to use my voice to be a light to someone.
Powerful. Sobering, man.
Yeah.
And I'm praying your comfort and strength, in the days ahead, man,
Yeah, it's hard. A lot of people don't know suicide is, having to be a family member to deal with that loss, because you literally think like, because sometimes you don't know that the person is struggling. So you literally think, and you're sitting there like, what can I do? What could I have done? I didn't know. And so you feel guilty. You feel like it's your fault. You go through all the stages of grief. And then you also go through just feeling like you get angry with that person, because you just knowing them, you just felt like there was just so much more that they had to give. And so every day it is a struggle. It's gotten better over the last few years. But every day I think about my sister, but I also think about the sisters that God gave me that are here. You know, I have my cousins, you know, we are like sisters, and I don't know what I would do if I didn't have them. I have my sisters who are my friends. And there's no comparison, you know, like God has truly blessed me. My dad, he's an amazing rock in my life. My mom, you know, my aunts and uncles, my children, my husband, you know, like God has really put me in a place where that loss has taught me to appreciate life, and then the life that God has given me, and then those who God has placed in my life. So.
Wow. So MyShawn, quite accomplished, you know, a bachelor's, 2 masters. Why doctoral studies, man? Mother of 3. You just have all the time in the world to.
Oh man, I wish it was the fact that I had all the time in the world. I mean, I've always wanted to become a doctor. And the funny thing is, when I was like gung ho about doing hair, I even like looked to see if there was like I could become a doctor of like cosmetology, because cosmetology is a science, but people don't know that's why it has the ology at the end of it, because it is a science. And I literally was like, I don't care if it's doing hair, I'm going to become a doctor. And, you know, and so I've always wanted to do that. But I had to take a break because I literally, last summer was rough. I had to have major surgery. But I realized in taking that time, I had become engrossed in my doctoral journey. And Ryan, I literally felt separated from the world. Like my children had growth spurts. And I was just like, when did that happen? You know, and just with everything that I have going on, being a mom of 3, you know, the wife of a husband who, you know, has a business and helping him with that. And, you know, children have their extracurricular activities. I have my 9-to-5 job that requires time and attention and giving to those who I serve. So I literally had to take a step back, but I did it because it needed to be done. And it's, for me, although it's just, for me, these degrees are just a paper. They don't mean anything when God's kingdom comes. They don't mean anything, right? But the impression that I can have using my degree in terms of research, in terms of, you know, building and opening the eyes of our community through research is really more so why I'm doing it. It's to awaken, it's to do more than scratch the surface, it's to peel off the Band-Aid, it's to, and it's unfortunate that it has to be, because, you know, you have people say, well, what degree do you have to speak on this particular topic? You know, we get that, but for me, it was a personal accomplishment that I had always set out to accomplish. And so whether it was cosmetology, whether it was criminal justice, whether it was counseling, psychology, medicine, it was a personal goal that I had always set out to accomplish. So.
And I'm sure it allows you to do more in your field. What's the particular emphasis of your doctoral studies, if you?
So my doctoral degree is criminal justice with a specialization in public management and leadership. And so what it it particularly affords me the opportunity to do things like research, to manage criminal justice agencies, to participate in other research endeavors in the field of criminal justice. It allows me to speak on different things that are overwhelming or overcoming the world of criminal justice, like minority men being incarcerated at higher rates than those individuals from other populations. It affords me the opportunity to write books, to do things like that. Program evaluation is one of them, and to identify when a program needs improvement and how. It affords me the opportunity to identify when a program who is receiving certain funding at both the local and the federal level, the funding, if it's being used improperly, and if it's being used exactly for the population that the agency says it's supposed to be used for.
And almost finally, I want to ask you about your biblical model or your example. Where do you see, in terms of a Bible character, yourself? Because I've heard the Good Samaritan in terms of your work. I've heard Naomi being a mentor to the roots of this world. And I've also heard David dealing with the giants of systemic racism and public policies that affect the marginalized and those who don't have a voice, etc. When you open the word, who matches you the closest in terms of a Bible character?
In terms of a Bible character, I don't know. I've never, honestly, I don't know. I've never likened myself unto a particular Bible character, but what I could say is I think like I'm a little bit of all. I'm not perfect. I've definitely done some things in my life that I have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. I definitely feel like the Bible and reading the Bible, because it is an instruction for daily life. I look at it as, some people look at it as an instruction of their religious life. I don't do that. I look at the Bible as a daily instruction of my everyday to-day life. Because there's a scripture that says we are not, and there's a song also that says we are not natural beings having a spiritual experience, but we are spiritual beings living a natural experience. And so I liken my life unto the Bible instructing me day to day on my spiritual journey. It guides my relationship with God. And so when I look at who Jesus was, he was an individual who spoke to the mentally ill, who healed the mentally ill. He was the individual who fed those who needed to be fed. He was the individual who saw those who were trying to see him and called them to him to have that encounter with him. He saw those who were ignorant in their ways, and just by speaking life into them, opened up their eyes to the world, and to humility and grace. And so I think for me, when I look at the Moses and the Joshuas and the Naomis and the Ruths and the Davids, I'm a little bit of all of that, because God is still molding, making, and shaping me, And so when I have an encounter with someone along my life's journey, my job is to show them who Jesus is. And whether it's by feeding them or just talking to them or finding a resource that they need, a telephone number to a domestic violence shelter, a food, what's the word I'm looking for? It slipped me. A food bank, a mental health agency, whatever it is. That's my worldly work. So I am a spiritual being living a natural experience. And so I have to exercise and to show who God wants me to be.
Lead worship week to week, from from the DMV to Mount Vernon to many other places. Is there a song currently that is on your playlist that when you hear the words of those songs, you were like, man, perhaps I wrote this song and just came back in time or went forward or backward? That song is my life story. Is there a song on your playlist now when you lead worship, the words, word for word, that's your biography?
Oh man, so there's many of songs, but there's this one song that Tasha Cobbs put out a couple of years ago, and it says, "You Know My Name." And I remember the first year, Ryan, you're gonna make me cry. Oh man, I just got chills. That song does something to me every time because I've been through so much in my life, you know, just feeling less than. In the days where I struggled, losing my sister, you know, feeling isolated, because, you know, my family is in New York, right? So just being in the DMV and having to adopt friends as family. But when Tasha Cobbs opens her mouth, ooh, and she says, "You know my name." Oh man, every time, you know, she introduces the song on her album, but when she opens up her mouth and she says that line right there, I just, even now, I get the chills because it reminds me that I don't need anybody else to see me.
Powerful.
I don't need anybody else to see me.
Mm-hmm.
As long as he sees me, I'm gonna be all right.
Yeah.
Whew, Ryan. Oh, I wasn't expecting to cry, but I needed that. I needed that.
Awesome. And finally, there's someone who isn't hitting a target, and that comes from a devotion I read just this morning. One of my mentors, Casey and Gordon, she does these weekly devotionals, and she gives an illustration about going to target practice and discovering why she had difficulty hitting the target. And there were a combination of things she raised, the equipment, her stance, shooting at the wrong target, perhaps.
Mm-hmm.
There's someone listening or viewing who is having difficulty hitting their target, their own personal target. And, you know, your work takes you through the complexities of why people miss or why people can't even see the target itself. What could you say to that individual now who is in that season or that place where they're not hitting the target and it's becoming frustrating and discouraging?
I would say stop, because I think it's the processing or the thought processes that we go through or that person is going through that is making them feel like they are missing the target. Sometimes what we want for ourselves is not what God wants for us. And so sometimes we have to stop. We have to focus in, reel it in, take a moment, take a deep breath, and start again. But this time when you start, do it with the guidance that God has given you. Pay attention to the signs. Pay attention, because sometimes, like I said, what we want for ourselves is not what God wants for us. And so sometimes God puts us in the position where he's directing us and moving us. And when he's going this way, humanly, we want to go this way. But God is like, no, I need you to come this way. And so if we stop, refocus, have a conversation with God, let go and let God. It may not be what you wanted, but the thing that we have to understand is sometimes the things that we want is what God is trying to save us from. Right? And sometimes that is even from ourselves. Even from ourselves. So stop, have a conversation with God, focus in on the target, reel it in, take a deep breath, and start again.
A mother, a wife, impactful ministry service. We got a lot today, very transparent. I believe someone got a word that would help them to get through a tough season, a challenging time. Maybe, as was just indicated, you're not seeing your target, or it's taking too long, the process, and you're becoming frustrated. And MyShawn gave a word a while ago about how to get redirected, recalibrated, how perhaps maybe this season where you're not on the pace that you would like is perhaps God doing his work in his own time. So
Yeah.
don't give up. I can tell you personally, man, my impatience got me in a lot of mess, man, but a loving God brought me back. And
Yes.
he'll do the same for you as well. Don't give up on your dreams. Don't give up on your goals. If you can't see the target, it doesn't believe God doesn't have one for you.
Absolutely.
Please keep the faith. Don't give up. MyShawn, thank you so much for joining us on the Water
Thank
Word
you for
Podcast.
having me. This was
Really blessed us. Blessed
awesome.
us.
Thank you
Thank you
so
so
much.
much. Blessings to you and your family.
Thank you so much, and same to you.
We
This
wish
was
you
an
much
honor.
success in your journey and continued blessings.
Thank you so much, Ryan. It was truly a pleasure. Thank you. Thank you.
Most
Thank
welcome.
you.
Most welcome.